I'll call a meeting of the Public Safety Committee meeting of December 18th, 2024 to order. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge we're on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. And I'm going to look to Ms. Vicar for any introduction of late items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My microphone is not working right now, but there are no late items.
Thank you. Could we please have a motion for the adoption of agenda? Moved by Judge Callahan, seconded by Scott, Dr. Scott Brody. All in favor? I'll go to first names now. Motion passes. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes, and is there any errors or omissions? Seeing no one, could I please have a motion for the adoption of the minutes? Moved by Ruth, seconded by Colin. All those in favor? Motion carries. Go to presentations. We have none. We're going to go to reports. There's going to be a verbal update on the Drop-In Mormon Center introduced by Ms. Christy Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. Am I up?
No, it's got to go green. Yeah, those mics aren't working.
Okay, I think I got a green light now. Perfect. Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to give the committee an update on the city-funded drop-in hub. I know that some of you are probably already aware of this proposed service, but just as a little bit of background, the city's funding a year-round drop-in hub that will also provide warming and cooling services for individuals living unsheltered, and it is a longer term, so it's going to be operating year-round and will operate 7 days a week, 7 hours a day, ensuring consistent and accessible space for those in need. So the key services that will be provided on site is access to basic needs. So it'll be providing access to food, hygiene supplies, clothing. There'll also be laundry services available on site. The service will also provide broader connections to other supports and services, including emergency shelter and housing services, healthcare, mental health resources, and other community-based services. And in addition, it will provide seasonal services. So it will be able to extend their hours. So anytime we have an extreme weather alert, whether it's cold or hot in the summer, we'll be able to extend the program hours to provide services at that time as well. In addition, work is currently underway with BC Housing to potentially provide up to 20 temporary winter emergency shelter beds at the drop-in between January and March. So the drop-in hub is located at 55 Victoria. The entrance is off Nichols Street. It's going to be operated by Island Crisis Care Society and Nanaimo Family Life Association. Both agencies were vetted through an evaluation process. Led by United Way and participated with city staff as well. Island Crisis Care Society, if folks don't know, is a nonprofit organization with over 25 years of service. They're currently running several supportive housing projects, shelters, both here in Nanaimo and Parksville. And then Nanaimo Family Life Association has been providing service for almost over 50 years here in Nanaimo, various social supports, but in the last 4 years operating the winter shelter up at St. Peter's, and more recently taken on the Unitarian shelter and the shower program down at Caledonia Park. The drop-in hub will open January 2nd, 2025. The hours of operations that are proposed are 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And the occupancy for the daytime services will be between 20 and 30, and that will just be based on kind of who's accessing the site right at that time, as well as storage needs, if there's shopping carts and things that might need to be considered in the service as well. The service model for the daytime services will have 4 staff on site, supported by additional custodial, maintenance, and administration staff. And as well, security services will include nightly patrols. They'll be working alongside the existing overnight shelter security services, at the location when the other service providers and other tenants that are in the building are off-site as well. So happy to answer any questions if the committee has any, but pleased to give that update to you.
Any questions? Ruth? Oh, yours isn't working either here.
Hi. So just to clarify, is there only going to be security services at night, or what about during the day?
Through the chair, to Ms. Taylor, the security services will be available overnight because we will have 4 staff on site. And so part of the staffing responsibility will be to be, roaming and, looking outside their doors on Nickel Street, as well as kind of monitoring the space inside as well.
Colin?
Yeah, at the close of the day, yeah.
Just the question that I have is, how will the city coordinate between the organizations that operate within and around 55 Victoria Road and the CSOs and the RCMP to address the predictable influx of drug trafficking that's happening at that location?
Through the chair to Mr. Middleton, I know that city staff have been working with service providers. I mean, one of the things that we are anticipating is that a lot of the folks that are hanging around outside of 55 Victoria will now have a space to come indoors to. So that will reduce, hopefully, some of that pressure that the Victoria Road is facing on that side. In addition, we, will have CSOs and RCMP welcome on site at any time. That is a requirement of, at least for the city portion funded for this type of service. So RCMP and the CSOs will be welcome on site, and it is an obligation that's built into the service agreement. I can't speak about the drug dealing question, but I know we do have Inspector Rochette here who may be able to answer questions about how RCMP is targeting drug dealing in the downtown area.
Inspector Rochette, can you speak to that? The question is targeting of drug dealers around the supportive housing units, as well as we're mostly focusing on 55 Victoria if dealers start to hang around that area.
Yeah, so just to answer the question is, well, as you were well aware, we have a team, the site team, which is a specialized targeted enforcement team, as well as our downtown enforcement team. So obviously they'll be made aware of this location and be part of their regular patrols to make sure that things are under control and there's no escalation of crime in regards to that area. So that's what we have in place right now to address concerns, and as well as with the CSO, if they have any concerns, they know to contact us and we can work with them and bylaw in regards of making sure everything is safe for all involved.
Follow-up, Colin?
Sort of answered my question, thank you. The only follow-up is it's the issue is around the attractant forces of these kinds of services in a very specific area that concentrate the social issues, and the drug trafficking that is happening at that location. It's often out of cars. I guess the follow-up is what specific things are being done given the concentration of drug trafficking happening at that location, that predictably, with these services coming in to be 24/7, what's being done to escalate the response and presence and surveillance of potential drug trafficking?
I don't believe that could be answered because that would go into operational details, which would not be appropriate at this time. But as the inspector said, they will have enhanced enforcement in the area, and they will be looking and monitoring. I would assume it's going to be very similar to what we've seen outside of City Hall, where there has been targeted enforcement of street-level dealers, and we've seen that in the news. So, but I don't think they can actually address how they're going to deal with it, because then that's just tipping people off. So, but I do believe I heard from Inspector Rochette that they're very aware of it, and it will be dealt with as situations arise. Any other questions on Ruth?
So looking at the hours, they're 11 to 6. So if there's staff on site between 11 and 6 that are going to be looking out the window and hopefully maintaining some semblance of order on the street. I walk down Victoria Road currently now without this hub there. And quite frequently at around 8 in the morning, the street is impassable. There's so much carts, there was a tent right on the street. And I know when people are say, well, now if you have somewhere for people to be at night, then that won't happen. But if there isn't any security prior to 11 a.m. and after, you know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do to proactively deal with what I could see as a situation that's already pretty bad? We have a sidewalk that's impassable. I had an elderly family member who had to walk into oncoming traffic because you cannot access the sidewalk. So people with strollers, people in wheelchairs, people with walkers, et cetera, like people are literally moving around Victoria Road and not walking down Victoria Road, in my experience. People are just refusing to use that street. So if it gets worse, I think that's going to be a real loss to the community. So how are we going to deal with that?
I'll pull in Mr. LaBerge just to speak on some of the CSO services, but I just want to reiterate that the entrance point to the drop-in hub will be on Nichols Street, so it's not through 55 Victoria. There's a door, so people will actually have to travel around to get to the Nichols Street entrance, because the entrance to the drop-in hub will be off Nichols Street. They will not be able to access the drop-in hub from 55 Victoria. Do you want to talk about CSO?
Yeah, thanks very much. Through the committee member from the chair. A couple of things. I think, first of all, in the inclement weather, a lot of the people that congregate on Victoria Road are accessing the health services that are in that building, and our hope, and historically it's shown that rather than congregating or sitting on the sidewalk all day, they're actually going to go into the Warman Center, so it should reduce the numbers that are congregated on the sidewalk is one expectation. But specific to your point of accessibility, I met with the CSOs in the last couple of days to talk about these concerns in the neighborhood, and realizing that it's very hard to move large numbers of people that are there, for services and with other limited places to go. The one thing the CSOs are very clear in doing is that people only congregate on one side of the road, probably alongside the buildings, and leave the other side and the sidewalks accessible. So if people are going up and down the street, strollers, et cetera, it may at time get a little congested on one side of the road, but the other side will always be maintained and clear, and that's something they're working on now.
Any other questions on the drop-in center? Okay, seeing none, we're going to now move on to restorative justice, and I believe Mr. Art Groot, who's the director of our police services, will be speaking to this.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Art Groot, and I'm the Director of Police Services. I have Kathy Gonzalez with me, who is the Manager of Police Support Services. On October 21st of this year, Council adopted a recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee meeting to increase the annual operating grant for the Nanaimo Restorative Justice Program, and referred the report to this committee for this date. So today is intended it's intended so that the staff from the Restorative Justice Program or from Connective can inform the committee about the program, its impact on the community, and just the benefits of the program. So with us, we have staff, Kluani and Lex, and so I believe Kluani is going to do the presentation, and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. My colleague Lex is just handing out informational package about a restorative justice program. I'm just going to test the clicker, which seems to not totally be working right now.
Jessica can click it for you.
Great.
You can just ask her.
Perfect.
Is that okay, Jessica?
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Perfect. Thank you, Art, for that introduction. So as Art mentioned, my name is Kluani Buzarive. I use she, her pronouns. You can also call me Clu if you'd like. And I've been managing the restorative justice program here in Nanaimo for 1.5 years, since August of 2023. And I'm here with my colleague Lex, our administrative program manager as well. I've been asked to share the exact same presentation we did to City Council on October 16th, so you will see down to the date, it is the exact same one. So some of you were in attendance for that presentation. Some of you are already quite familiar with our services, so I will keep this presentation a bit shorter because I also really value what discussion could come afterwards, because I think we're also very curious to hear from the perspective of this committee how our restorative justice program can help address some of the key priorities that this committee has identified to increase public safety in this community. From reading through the previous committee meeting minutes, I can already see that there's a number of synergies with our work and our program. So that can include retaining businesses in the downtown core area. We receive a number of referrals for damage done to private property and to local businesses. I've also seen priorities in the meeting minutes around good relations with schools, improving and maintaining officer morale, all pieces that I'll speak to how we can impact through our program as well. I also hear a big priority around drug use, possession, and trade, and so we do a number of referrals for federal drug trafficking charges and have seen some really incredible success on those files as well, which I can tell you a bit more about. We have a few goals here. I want to share some information about the Restorative Justice Program for those that might be a bit newer to it. And we also, in our program, are looking for allies and supporters who understand the value of our work. And so it's been really great to be able to have this opportunity to present to your committee, as well as commit to Mayor and Council, present to them as well. And you'll see this presentation is a bit funding focused in a few parts. That's because when we were requesting an increase in funding, that was our focus in the October 16th presentation. As Art mentioned, we're really excited to share that our funding has gone from $50,000 a year, which it had stayed since 1998, now to $150,000 a year. That's a significant difference. It means that we can have 2 core staff and then kind of grow from there in terms of grants and other funding that we can seek to increase as well. And we can do a next slide. Thank you. A few core values. So we create opportunities for offenders and people who have caused harm to engage in repair through resolution agreements. A huge focus in our work is addressing root causes of behaviors and supporting offenders to access supports to address underlying issues. This can include mental health, addictions, being unhoused, systemic factors. We also allow the opportunity for offenders to take responsibility for their actions and understand the harm they've caused. A really important core part of our work as well is that we are a victim-centered process. This can be quite different than other forms of justice that exist. So victims have a space to share the impact of the crime on themselves, as well as shape the process and outcome at every stage of the way. They get to request resolution agreement terms. They get to inform what questions we ask of them in a restorative justice dialogue, where they sit in the circle. And so for victims of crime who have often had, say, voice and choice removed, this process gives it back to them to be able to inform the process throughout. Another strength and value in our work is that restorative justice principles do come out of Indigenous communities and traditional forms of justice. And so we've heard feedback from our Indigenous clients that our justice processes are more closely able to mimic what they have seen in their home communities. And we also collaborate with Snuneymuxw Nation, as well as their Justice Committee in the past, to work together on some files. I'll do a tiny bit of myth busting if anyone's a little bit new to restorative justice. So sometimes there's this idea that it's only for youth. That is not true. We have clients between the ages of 8 and 80 right now. Right now, about 55% of our clients are youth, so a tiny bit more than our adults, but we work with folks of all ages. Another myth can be that it's only for more minor offenses, for example, shoplifting. And so I can confirm that we have very serious offenses that come to us. And actually, we've had a huge rise in complexity. I think we've had maybe 1 or 2 shoplifting files in this last fiscal year, whereas there have been many serious assaults, intimate partner violence, sexualized violence, drug trafficking and possession, as well as other forms of complex harm. We'll go to the next one. I'll just show you what offenses were referred to restorative justice in the last fiscal year. You'll see a broad variety of different crimes and harms here. And so what's important to know is that restorative justice, one of our strengths is that it's a very tailored process. There's no 2 processes that look the same. There's no 2 people that are the same. There's also no 2 offenses or harms that are the same. And so that has been one of our biggest strengths, is that we're informed by the people at the table, their needs, their concerns, and then we can design a unique process to meet their needs. Basically, we receive referrals from a number of different sources. Our biggest source of referral, next slide, is the RCMP. We also receive referrals from both provincial and federal Crown, as well as youth probation and community referrals, including school district or school referrals. We can go to the next slide. So once a referral is received, we conduct an intake with both the responsible party, the offender, as well as the affected party or parties, the victims. We determine that it's a good fit for restorative justice. In the offender, we're looking for someone who has taken responsibility and accountability, someone who is willing to engage in repair, someone who demonstrates remorse. If they could do it over again, they would make a different choice. And then we kind of help connect them to the resources and tools they need to be able to make that better choice in the future. This is a case study example of a youth that was causing a lot of trouble to the RCMP and using up a ton of police resources. She had had over 30 contacts with police when she came referred to our program. And that was a really consistent pattern for serious assault. She had mental health concerns as well as substance use concerns, hadn't attended school regularly in over a year. She first started contact with police like between grades 6 and 7, so this was quite a young youth. And through an over year-long process that was recently concluded, we've been able to offer her family a number of supports. Organization Connective Restorative Justice is just one of the programs, and so we were able to connect her family to housing support as well as substance use support. And we connected this youth to one of our volunteer youth mentors, as well as a tutor who worked with her. We did educational sessions on managing emotion, peer pressure, healthy relationships, communication skills. She started attending trauma counseling regularly, which was one of the biggest kind of game changers for her in terms of her behavior. She hasn't had contact with police in over 9 months now. She's attending school regularly every day and has really built in a lot of like pro-social activities into her life. And this is not an uncommon story. I've been doing this for a year and a half now. I've worked over 100 files. This is a very common story that when people are given the tools and the resources they need to be able to make better choices, they're ready and willing. Next slide. A few strengths. There are many. One of the pieces here that's important is early intervention for youth. In particular, in our youth work, we see youth who might have a repeated pattern of behavior, but we also see youth sometimes where this is like their first time having contact with police or making a choice that caused harm. And so we're able to do those early interventions, and we hear often from clients years later that the restorative justice process was the intervention point for them that helped them make better choices moving forward. We see an increase in public safety in a number of different ways, and so that includes through reducing rates of recidivism really significantly. This is one of the biggest strengths of restorative justice. It also improves community police relations, public perceptions of law enforcement. There's also a piece there on putting less stress on policing services. There's a lot for police, for the RCMP to be doing here in this community, and if we can release some of their staff time to more important cases and more major files, then that's a public safety benefit to us all. There's also an increased satisfaction of the procedure from both victims and offenders, and there's also a reduced financial burden and strain on the justice system as well. Culturally informed process, I spoke to that a bit earlier. Addressing root causes, again, one of the biggest themes of our work as well. You can go to the next slide. Here's a few sample agreements. So the one on the left is actually for a federal drug trafficking and possession charge. So in this case, restorative justice is used as an alternative to incarceration. Some of our most motivated clients are the federal charged ones. And this was a client who came to us actually still in active substance use. And our process is voluntary. We don't tell people what to do, but we do have conversations about accountability, about repair, about how further harm can be prevented into the future. And through conversations with this client, he himself identified that he would continue to cause harm to his family and to his community if he was still in active use. And so we were able to refer him to our in-house treatment center with Connective. He completed a 4-month stay there. During that time, he also did a number of counseling sessions. He did a significant amount of community service. He prepared an apology letter. He did a parenting skills program when he realized that his family and his children were some of the most impacted by his actions. He also participated in our employment program and had good faith commitments to family and recovery. This is a file I just closed a month or two ago. It was, I think, 13 or 14 months long, really significant one. The other one is a youth assault file and uttering threats file as well. So you'll see they were paired with one of our youth mentors. They also did community service. They accessed YSTAR and Nanaimo, an excellent program through Island Health. And in the informational package, you'll also see another example of a file. This is a youth file that we had just closed last month, November 15th or so. An example of an apology letter that the youth prepared, an example of what their agreement terms were. And something I want to highlight here too is that restorative justice, sometimes people think it's like the easy way out or this kind of like soft on crime approach. And believe me, some of the clients also think that when they walk through my door, but I can tell you that research shows, as well as my empirical personal research of experiencing restorative justice, I see clients be very surprised at how challenging this is. As you can imagine, if you cause someone significant harm and then you're asked to sit in a dialogue in a circle across from them and hear directly how they have been harmed, and then have to engage in direct repair, it can be a really meaningful process for people. And that's also part of the piece around lowering rates of recidivism. If the consequence is you have to stare directly in the face of the consequence of what harm you caused, that can be very compelling to not cause that same harm again. Next slide. This is the funding piece that I was speaking about that was in the first presentation. We had a decrease in funding that happened for a couple different reasons. There were some funds that were available to us through COVID recovery funds, and so we were able to grow our program to a larger team. And there were a few grants and funding things that were cut kind of about a few months into my time. I started with 2 full-time case managers, and now we've been operating for a year as a 1-staff program. We have been certainly punching above our weight. We do the same amount of files, which is between 75 and 125 files a year, as Restorative Justice Victoria does, with a team of 5 staff and 80 volunteers. So it's been very busy, and we're really excited to have more support and a larger staff team, in large part due to the City of Nanaimo increase in funding. And that is something we'll continue to look for, because this program will operate at its best with a larger staff team, more volunteers supporting as well. We've had to implement case wait lists as well as a program break over this last summer. We have had to turn away some complex files. The RCMP knows that we have lower capacity, so they have been reducing the amount of referrals they're making to us. It is a top priority for the RCMP to be investing in restorative justice and to get those numbers up, and so it has been really hard for us to be able to want to meet that need as well. And I will say, I think the people most impacted by the low funding to the program is certainly City of Nanaimo citizens who would like to have access to this essential justice service as well. We've heard a lot of community needs in this work. It's very exciting that restorative justice is getting more well-known, including through this presentation. And so we have the school district asking us to increase our presence in the schools, to provide acute support for conflicts emerging in the schools, to train their administrators and teachers in restorative principles. And we would love to do that. And so we're currently trying to figure out how we might be able to do that. There's a number of programs across British Columbia demonstrating how restorative justice approaches in schools have had a huge reduction in school conflict and harm and crime rates. There's a lot of complexity. Over the last 25 years, our files have increased in complexity exponentially. As I'm sure many of you have seen, people have become more complex and the harms have become more complex as well. I'll leave that there. I think the next one should be funding models. Yeah. So there's the one that we got. Number 3, we're very grateful to have received that support. So now from the City of Nanaimo, we'll have 1 full-time, that's me, program manager, as well as a 0.83 FTE program manager or program, oh sorry, it says program manager, it should say case manager there. So we'll be looking to hire in our new fiscal year, which begins April 1st of next year. Next, yeah, thank you. These are some of the supporters, some of the folks that we've worked with over the last few years. We've worked with different detachments and areas within the RCMP, First Nations Justice Council. We have the school district, as I mentioned, that's very interested in increasing access to services. We also have a request from the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society to expand our services for hate-motivated crimes. Sometimes the client base that they work with need a form of justice that's accessible in their first language. Sometimes that also doesn't involve a police intervention if there's discomfort around reaching out for that. So that's an ask that we're looking to meet in the coming year. We worked with the Namath Justice Committee, as I mentioned, over the last few years. And there are a number of other restorative justice organizations across the island and the province that we have connections with that help us kind of improve our services as we go. Next. we're getting towards the end of me talking, and so I just wanted to highlight that we have a few letters of support. We have one from Inspector Rochette in the back, as well as Kirsten Funk-Robinson, the Director of Instruction, Learning and Inclusion from School District 68. We also have a letter of support from Crown Council, from the Executive Director of the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society, also from Sergeant Michael Carey, the Indigenous Policing Advisor for the RCMP, who has really highlighted that restorative justice has a real role in the community around that piece. And so I'll start to conclude with the next slide. And I'll share that restorative justice and our approach, it really is about, instead of taking someone out of community when they cause harm, it's about actually keeping them in community. And what we found that when we're not taking people away through incarceration or exile due to judgment and stigma, we're actually keeping them within the fold of community. And research and our results show that when people feel connected to the community, they don't want to harm it. And so a lot of the crime and harm that we're seeing sometimes can be a result of disconnection, of not feeling invested in their community. And I'll end with just a few points about the Public Safety Committee notes that I've seen from previous presentations and a few kind of points of connection. So I saw in the previous meetings there was discussion of restorative justice, and so a desire to advocate for it. So we agree, we're here, we're very happy to talk about options for what it would look like to increase our capacity to meet the needs of the community and grow our services. I've mentioned a few kind of connections that we have in terms of being involved with retaining local businesses downtown, good relationships with school, a reduction in crime and disorder as well. And I know that the severity of crime is increasing, as indicated in the Crime Severity Index, and that's, again, this piece of seeing increasingly complex files that we would like to have the training and tools to address moving forward. The informational package has a bit of research information related to public safety and restorative justice across Canada, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to questions from the committee. Do we have any questions? Doug?
Thank you, Clauanne, for a very expert rendition about restorative justice, and it's a big subject to condense, and you did a fine job. A couple of questions. Who are your community service partners? I know the probation used to use the SPCA, and some people use recycling, but do you have any particular partners you use for the community work service?
Yes, that is a great question. Through the chair to the community member, we work with a number of different local organizations that are willing to work with folks who may have caused harm in their past. One that's coming to mind right now is the Growing Opportunities Farm on Skaha Drive. They have an incredible volunteer coordinator who is well skilled at working with a broad diversity of clients. So we've had a number of people do work there. We have also Loaves and Fishes has been quite popular for our clients with their different scheduling options and a really great team there. A lot of clients of mine have continued to volunteer there afterwards because they really enjoyed their time. The SPCA sometimes also we have clients work with. We've had clients work either within the nation or at their schools and do kind of on-site volunteering there. Someone recently went hunting for deer and then redistributed amongst the elders in their community. And so we have a lot of flexibility. Community service is whatever benefits the community. And so we can find different ways to do that.
Follow up, Doug?
And I understand how referrals come from probation and from Crown. I'm not familiar with how referrals come from the RCMP.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so members are welcome to send a referral to us. There's a referral form that they have to complete. We, in particular, receive a lot of youth referrals from the RCMP youth team, the ones that are kind of liaising with different schools, but we also receive some adult referrals from them as well. They assess the case. They speak with the offender in particular to see if they're a good fit for restorative justice, and then I receive the referral. Sometimes if there's complexity there, a member will reach out to me for a phone call or a meeting just to discuss the needs of the clients a bit more. And then we conduct our own intake process, vet the case, and then move forward from there.
And I understand how the thrust of what you're doing is trying to keep people out of jail, but sometimes the offense is serious enough that there will be a jail sentence and there may be parole or probation afterwards. Mm-hmm. Do you get involved at that point to help with recidivism?
Yeah, absolutely. As a program, we can receive referrals at any stage. And so sometimes we receive pre-charge referrals, sometimes we receive post-charge referrals, sometimes we do parallel to court processes. And so there's a lot of nimbleness there, depending on the needs of the clients.
Okay. And finally, do you work with the Men's Resource Center or the Native Court Workers Association?
Yeah, both of those organizations. Yeah, for men who have caused harm, there aren't actually a ton of resources for folks or programs that offer accessible services, and so we've reached out to them, that first organization that you mentioned. And then also we work with Native court workers on files. We attend court sometimes with our clients as well.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? Ruth?
How are referrals received from community?
Great question, through the chair to the community member. Oftentimes it's a phone call or an email to us with like, hey, I have something, I'm not sure what the right process is to move forward with this. And then folks will set up an intake conversation with me. We received a community referral, for example, for a case of medical harm that occurred within the Nanaimo hospitals. It was a case of racial discrimination to an Indigenous woman who was trying to access services there. She did not want to go through their formal complaint process, and so she chose to take a restorative approach, and that culminated in a 4-day healing circle event with local elders where different staff from that hospital were invited to attend.
Thank you. So what I'm looking for from the committee is that if the committee is so inclined that we advocate, that we push, that we get mayor and council to push for more provincial funding, which hasn't seen an increase in I don't know how many years, that we see the benefit to the program in keeping people out of the court system, helping them stay connected to their community, as we heard, and showing that Nanaimo has stepped up to the plate by tripling their financial so that we can do this program. So I don't know if there's any more comments around that or what people think about the program or what thoughts you're looking at. But I'm just going to speak from my perspective as a former RCMP officer, used the program a lot, saw the great successes that it had. I'd much rather see youth go through that than go through the court system. And I'm sure Judge Cowling could attest to the how great the program is for a lot of people, that court's not the place for everybody. It is for some, but not for all. Thank you. Colin?
Yeah, I think from my work with the Nanaimo Area Public Safety Association, one of our directors is a very big advocate for restorative justice programs, and I think there's that, you know, perhaps it's underutilized generally, but I think it really is an effective way of dealing with this, so that that both the victim and the perpetrator can move on in a productive way without the difficulties that lie ahead when you get stuck in the court system.
I was going to say, I think one of the reasons it has been underutilized is, as we saw, they don't have the staff capacity due to funding. So I think it's really important. Like for me, I really want to send a message out that, you know, the province has got to step up to the plate. You know, they should be funding this program because it really does make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And we're not putting people into jail. We're putting them back into the community where they can actually grow themselves and get out of that life. Colin?
Yeah, when we talk about kind of trying to interrupt the cycle of violence, suffering, addiction, you know, the getting stuck in the system, the court system. I mean, fat chance getting a job after you're stuck, after you have a criminal record, right? I mean, it's so the whole system has become set to the point where there are good people that have criminal records that, if, you know, there was restorative justice systems that were utilized for them, they would have been able to make amends and move on with their life. And I think, you know, in terms of trying to address the public health and safety emergency we have with respect to drug overdose and so on, this is actually part of that solution. And yeah, I think it's amazing.
Any other comments, or Doug?
I share your frustration about the provincial funding. They theoretically collect victim fine surcharges. That money never seems to make it back to the community. And in Cluanne's material, she mentions how it's $345 a day now to keep someone in prison. And when you keep someone out of prison, you're saving the province money at the city's expense. So, I don't know if it would help at all if our funding model said we were prepared to put in more money if the province matched funds. But that's
I think you really raise a good point about the victim surcharge. That's maybe something we could follow up with ourselves as a city. Where are these dollars going and are they coming back? I don't know if they're coming back into policing. Like, there's a certain amount of fines from traffic they're supposed to come back in for prevention, so I don't know. I'll do some follow-up on that, but is anybody prepared to make a motion towards advocacy that our mayor and council push for the province to do more funding? Scott, you're willing to make the motion?
Yep, Scott is willing to make the motion, yes.
Okay, seconded by Colin. Any further discussion around it? No, Ms. Picard?
Madam Chair, thank you. If I can just clarify what the motion is. So I believe it's the committee recommend the council continue to advocate the provincial government for funding for the Nanaimo Restorative Justice Program.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you. Seeing no other further discussion, all those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carries. Thank you, and thank you so much, and wishing you continued success. Great program, strong supporter.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Art. Okay, we're now moving on to our next one, which will be an interesting one because it's being headed by Mr. LaBerge.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the city's liquor control strategy was completed by Nielsen Consulting back in the summer of 2002. Purpose of the report in the day was to make the city responsive to changes in provincial licensing policies. So a couple things were going on. First of all, they were changing the number of classes of licenses available. There used to be many layers, cabarets, lounges, pubs, etc. And they're switching to just kind of a two class system, liquor primaries and food primaries. So restaurants that would sell alcohol and then entertainment cabarets that had no food service. The second piece that was fairly significant is this was the evolution into the sphere of private liquor stores. They were all government operated to this point, and they were going to allow, and as they were going to let the private market go into this business, they decided to tie the licensing to existing liquor primary establishments. So if you had a liquor establishment, you could then apply to have a liquor store. And also, which was significant, was that the liquor stores had to be proximate to existing liquor establishments. And why that was significant to the city of Nanaimo is that there were 16 liquor primary establishments downtown at the time. So if you added to that, they would say geographically that we'd have potentially 16 liquor stores along with the cabarets, et cetera. Great number of the liquor primary establishments downtown were the high occupancy cabarets, the dance clubs. And because of this over-concentration and because of the large number of people that used to congregate in the downtown streets, kind of like your modern Granville, there was a perception that it contributed to the unsafety of downtown. That was because of the uncivil behavior around the establishments of the young crowds that were congregating. Really stood out on Skinner Street, where now we have about 1,200 licensed seats on that street. Also added to that context, there was a significant organized crime presence that contributed to a culture of violence, particularly in the high occupancy clubs. Another challenge that the report identified was what they called market competition, that to have tactics to gain a market share, and it was things like offering deeply discounted drink specials, often below the price of actually purchasing the alcohol, exotic dancers, and a lot of raucous-themed parties that would bring a lot of energy and tension into the clubs, trying to corner part of a really competitive market. That was some of the challenges inside the clubs. Outside, there was a culture of uncivil behavior in and around the district. That included things like drug use on the streets, drinking, real problem with public urination, particularly in the doorways of other businesses, fighting, noise disturbances, and higher incidents of impaired driving. One thing that the Nielsen report also took note of is that the clubs generally didn't take a lot of responsibility in managing the types of things that we're describing, that were not managing the conduct of their patrons outside their clubs, not watching their patron cues, and at closing time, some of the clubs on Skinner Street had occupancy of 500 and 600 people. They push them out in the street, close the doors, and then, there was nobody managing, dispersing those crowds. That gave rise to a lot of demands on the police because unmanaged be a lot of violence, a lot of disorder, and at times they would have to take the entire resources, police resources that we're working on a Friday or Saturday night just to try to manage the dispersal from the clubs. One thing that, if you've read through the report, is he referred to the club district as being an urban dead zone. And it's kind of an interesting idea because when you go down Skinner Street is the best example. You've got a bunch of windowless buildings that are nightclubs that really operate maybe 2 or 3 nights a week when they're really busy, but during the day there's no other activity. And they call that an urban dead zone, and it's significant when you're trying to create pedestrian flow and senses of safety. If people are going, say, between the Old City Quarter and down on Commercial Street, you have these kind of voids of lack of daytime activity. So there were kind of zoning thoughts that were layered on this as well. So, there's a lot more to it, a lot of zoning related things, but I just want to focus on disorder pieces. So I want to talk about the strategies that were developed by the city as a result of Nielsen's recommendations. The first one was good neighbor agreements. We use them in a lot of contexts, but what we did is require all the clubs downtown to sign into a good neighbor agreement. It was signed by the chief of police, the mayor, and the owners of the establishments. There were 16 points in each one of them, and it was to address each one of the things that describe noise emissions, drink prices, managing patron queues, keeping the area clean, et cetera. And the question over time was, well, we've got these agreements, but how do we enforce them? And what we've done over time is to actually embed them as conditions of the club's business licenses. So now it's got a bit of teeth into it. Minimum drink prices were regulated by bylaw. Although I have to say that the era of deeply discounted drink, if anybody's gone to a club lately, it's kind of moot. That market competition is gone, and we don't see deeply discounted drinks anymore. Cost recovery we put into our business bylaws, so we would charge much greater business licensing fees for cabarets and high occupancy establishments that contribute to a lot of this type of disorder. So a typical business license was $165. We actually charged several $1,000s for their licenses. What we did over time is we've eliminated that as we've got more cooperation from these establishments. And part of the reduction was we told these clubs is if they would install patron scanning technology so they knew who was in their establishment, that they could track, and I'll talk about that a bit more, that we would give a significant discount on their business licensing fees. And that was an important municipal incentive to join onto those programs. And more on that in a minute. So the patron scanning, it's kind of neat. When you went into any establishment, it would take a photograph of the patron entering, scan their ID, and this information would be held for a period of 24 hours and then be eliminated in accordance with privacy laws. But what it would do is it would, number one, determine at any time who was in the establishment. It took away the anonymity, but also determine whether they'd been banned from any other establishment for uncivil behavior, not only in Nanaimo, but anywhere in North America where they're using this technology. In our case, it was really significant because this was a big tool used in Vancouver. And this was around the evolution of some of the early gang war activity. And it was a really useful tool, not only for the establishments, for the police to not only keep organized crime out of the clubs, but determine when they were in town. This technology is still used in a number of our clubs. Another thing that we did was we enacted the public nuisance bylaw. It brought a lot of tools to the police to deal with uncivil behavior that we didn't have before. This included fines for things like fighting, causing a disturbance, throwing bottles, obstructing other people, or traffic on the street, crowd behaviors, graffiti, public urination, etc. And this was actually a really important tool because a lot of these things like fighting, I mean, the only other thing the police could do is deal with it as a criminal matter, and it didn't make a lot of sense to expend a lot of police and court resources for kids fighting outside of clubs. So it was dealt with through bylaw strategies. One of the things that was really significant and probably worthy of conversation with this group is that was the genesis of the installation of the first permanent washroom, the one that's still in existence on Danakrall Plaza. Because what would happen is the kids would leave the nightclubs at 1 and 2 in the morning at closing time and work their way down to the late night restaurants, and they would urinate in the doorways of all the businesses on the way down. So it's interesting, that isn't so much a challenge with the clubs anymore. It's more our large unsheltered population, but it was a really important tool. And at the time, I think we invested, do you remember? $110,000. I mean, we're looking at
2010 or 2011.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at about $300,000 to $400,000 for the same apparatus now. One of the things that we did and that the city's looking at now is we regulated mobile food trucks, and we didn't allow them in the hospitality zones. And the whole idea is when we had 1,000 kids leaving the clubs, excuse me, on Skinner Street, which is a very narrow one-way street, is we didn't want them hanging around for the next hour having poutine and milling about and fighting, because that's what they tended to do. So we always took the food, we moved the taxi queues and everything away from the concentrations, and it really created a lot of flow at closing time. And lastly, and probably most significantly, is we created a police-led bar watch program. It was modeled in some respects after Vancouver, but it was tailored to the challenges we had. We had hoped that it would have been hospitality industry-led, but it ended up being organized and driven by the police. We started it in 2007. And basically what it was a collective commitment by the hospitality industry to take a zero tolerance to violence. As I said, we had a significant organized crime presence in the clubs that drove a lot of that violence. It was very, very difficult for the hospitality industry to push back on that. So what we said was collectively, here are the rules. Any violence, any uncivil behavior, any outward presentation or wearing of clothing that would identify somebody as a member of a gang, that was all prohibited. So if you went in wearing gang colors, you'd not only be banned from that establishment, but all the establishments participating in the bar watch program. The idea being, if we remove a hostile element from one club and there's 15 other clubs they can go to, you never weed it out of those clubs. So basically on civil behavior, breaching bar watch policies really meant you had no social life, at least as far as downtown was concerned. And I can tell you, it caught the attention of organized crime very quickly, not just local, but people that were visiting from other cities. We also dedicated police teams that just exclusively patrolled the club districts during peak weekends, during festivals, during holiday periods when the clubs were busy. That enabled policing to focus, normal patrols to focus on other issues around the city without sucking all the resources down there. And it created a really powerful synergy and partnership, not only with the clubs and the police, but also the groups that we were trying to deal with. And when I pause and talk about organized crime, the understanding was if you're part of a known organized crime group, it didn't necessarily say that we would ban you from the establishments. It just said you can't wear colors, you can't wear things that would identify you as a gang member. And as long as you behave civilly and respectfully, you could go and have opportunities to go to these clubs like anybody else. There is and always was regular meetings with all establishments. With the liquor inspectors, the city's always been involved in that. And in the early 2010s, we expanded Bar Watch to include all the club restaurants and busy pubs in the remainder of the city, because what we had found over time was organized crime was now creeping into those things, and a lot of the violence problems that we previously had in high occupancy dance clubs are now actually occurring in club restaurants. And, and that really set the bar high then. I mean, if you behave poorly in any establishment in the city, you basically had no social life. So the Bar Watch program has been kind of the driving force in implementing and monitoring the liquor control strategy, the recommendations of the Nielsen report. I can tell the committee that the hospitality industry has changed substantially since 2002. We have fewer liquor primary establishments, and really now we have club-style restaurants throughout the city. A lot of them have endorsements for entertainment and for patron participation in that entertainment. The hospitality industry, as we all know, took some serious hits during COVID, and a lot of our really big clubs closed down and have never reopened. So the market has changed. I can also tell the committee that there's still a local and a transitory organized crime presence in the city. We still have periodic incidents of targeted violence, but because of the efficacy of the Bar Watch program, it's substantially been kept out of our hospitality industry, and that's something that many other cities have been unsuccessful to do. So we have a very good program, and certainly any conversation should, remain with how we can support that program. From a public safety perspective, I would say that things are going quite well in Nanaimo right now. I've talked with staff, I've talked to police. We don't have any specific public safety concerns or suggestions to bring to the committee. But I did talk to the hospitality industry at the last Bar Watch meeting, and they said they'd be happy to come to a future meeting if that's of an interest to the committee to give the hospitality perspective on the things that I've described today. And I would just like to close, whether I could give any other thoughts or guidance to the committee, and I found something online, a local government guide to creating municipal alcohol policy, and this was created by the province of British Columbia, and I'll leave it with the chairs, but they talk about steps that we can take that don't overstep our jurisdiction and liquor regulations, talking about that creating additional conditions for alcohol sales that would help establishments or special occasions monitor and serve patrons. You can make requirements for insurance requirements, requirements for providing safe transportation from major events, requirements on how organizations that want to host major events and festivals, how they organize their event security, and then general policies around enforcement policies. So that's from the province. So I'll stop it there, Chair. Thank you, and answer any questions.
I guess one of the things is, this was actually a topic added by Mr. Harding, who's not here. But I guess what is it you're looking for the committee to do? Like, I think that's one thing that we need to know. Like, I know Doug had sent me something, and I know one thing that we had discussed was there's some communities, and I think North Van is one of them, where they're allowing public consumption in some parks. Is that something that we're looking at in this policy? And if so, I guess it's like, what do you want from the committee to look at? Like, our overall policies? Are we, like, do you want us to comment on the Bar Watch program? I guess my concern is, what do you want from the committee?
Well, thank you, Chair. As I said, this wasn't a line that we brought forward. Certainly, the committee could look at things like, the city Penticton has allowed liquor consumption in certain zones on public beaches in that jurisdiction. I don't know if that's so much a public safety matter as a parks and zoning matter. Certainly, there might be public safety implications. I don't know if Mr. Holm has any kind of comment. What we don't want to do is create a bunch of work or suggest things that are outside the scope of the terms of reference of the committee.
No, that's fine, but we were just talking about that because our liquor policy is from 2020 or 2002, and there's been a lot of changes in public consumption and stuff. And thanks to the committee members that did send forward, like the medical health officer's report on alcohol consumption, et cetera. So that was great to see that information. But I'm going to open it up to the committee as to what they see, or if they think there's even a role for the committee in it. Any comments? Doug?
I was just curious if there's anything in the bylaws. The liquor control inspectors can shut down an establishment, if they serve someone underage or something. but the city may have a different perspective with a problematic establishment. Is there anything where you can temporarily revoke their license? Because I would, shut them down for a week if the RCMP say there's problems, there's drink spiking, or there's bad behavior.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Of course, the municipality have a number of roles. Number one, bringing our concerns to the provincial liquor inspectors. But as I said, we've also tied a lot of the concerning behaviors into the conditions of the business license. So what we can do is take these matters through our licensing department, issue warning letters, temporary suspensions. A lot of this would have to be brought to council, but we can suspend or even cancel business licenses, which would effectively shut the establishment down.
Follow-up?
Some places use bonding for establishments. So if you want to open a nightclub, or if you have a history of problems, the city might be able to ask them to post a bond so that if they just close the doors and shut down, you still have access to a penalty or compensation for all the RCMP overtime.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. I'm not aware of that, but we can certainly see if there are any municipalities that have that requirement.
I guess from my perspective, after hearing you talk about the stuff, a lot of the things that you're talking about really aren't as impacted anymore. I mean, like you said, we don't have as many nightclubs anymore, so are we seeing the social disorder? Like, police are gone, obviously, but is that an issue anymore, or is that sort of like, is there anything really that this committee can recommend that needs to be done, or based on the changing demographics, is it a moot point?
Well, and I certainly invite Mr. Holm to add any comment. I mean, one of the things we're looking at is there any policies that need to be examined around festival events? So if you have a night market or, somebody where we close down city streets and have events and there's live music and alcohol, how widely the alcohol sales can be arranged. Like, is it put in the traditional beer garden with the fences around it, or could we let people kind of roam around bigger areas of parks, et cetera? I don't know if that's a public safety or more of a, that's where I want to be a little cautious and not stepping out of the terms of this committee.
Yeah, I'm, in all honesty, I'm actually mixed on that. I can see that, people might, if they're drunk in a public place, but there's already provisions under the Provincial Act for that. My concern when it comes down to, and I was saying to this Ruth earlier, because I thought about, if we opened up, let's say, Matthew Sutton Park for liquor consumption. But then this is how a lot of, people make their monies through their beer garden, so that, the Dragon Boat Festival, so they can keep going on. So I think it's a wider discussion about that, but is it, and like you said, does that belong to recreation? Does that belong to public safety committee? I'd welcome, I see you, Scott, making what are your thoughts? I'm gonna put you guys on the spot.
Yeah, that's fine. You can put me on the spot. I guess I don't know. I'm always down for comparative research. So have other communities done this, and has there been public safety issues as a result of opening up parks, more drinking? I do think there were some issues in Vancouver when they opened up drinking in parks but those were littering issues. There's fighting and things too happening. I think when they allowed drinking on beaches, there was some issues, but I don't see it right now as being, I just don't know what we're sort of grappling with at this point, but it could certainly become an issue, I think.
Yeah. Destiny, do you have any thoughts?
I agree. I would be interested in seeing if there were issues in other community, but I'm with you on the fence of whether it's actually a public safety or a recreation thing. I would lean more towards recreation.
Colin?
I'm kind of struggling to gather my thoughts on this. I mean, I think there is definitely a public safety element to it. Part of this, I remember that when DCRIM came in and there was a big discussion about, if you can smoke drugs anywhere now, why can't we drink alcohol anywhere now too, right? And instead of saying the solution is, we don't really actually want more drugs in public, it's like, well, no, let's just have more drugs. Let's just have more alcohol. And yeah, we totally should let people just drink in public. I mean, it's just, I don't know. There is a public safety element to this. I don't see it just as recreation. You know, most people, most of the time, will be responsible, but that's not the people we're talking about. We're talking about the people that do cause problems and then ruin it for everybody. So.
No, that's, yeah. Ruth, any thoughts?
I think that the point that really struck me is the idea that we may be undercutting some really, really good fundraising efforts by organizations such as, the Dragon Boat Festival, or, if it is something where people do get their money from the beer gardens, then expanding that is, could have unintended consequences for those organizations. Yeah, and I guess just for me, I think more substances isn't good. I mean, maybe that's just because of where I live and what I see on a daily basis. I would like to be able to go to the park and not see people drinking on top of all the other stuff that we're seeing with my kids. That's just me. So I like that I can take them to Departure Bay and there aren't people openly drinking, or, in fact, ironically, people are less likely to have an open can of beer than they are to be using illicit, drugs. So I'm going to say that I wouldn't really want to support that, just based on the climate right now, even if it does seem contradictory or hypocritical.
Hillary, you got anything?
I think I have heard from some downtown folks and event organizers about the barriers to operating certain spaces and to running certain events, and there's nuanced rules around like the ability to have dancing in an establishment without a liquor license. Like it's complicated, and I don't know all the rules around it, but I know if you want to host an event with dancing, there's some piece where there's a license required, even if people aren't actually drinking. So I think there's two sides that I see to it, where getting a bit more creative and open with this could enable some economic development and opening up of other like cultural and event opportunities, especially downtown, which could be really beneficial for the arts and culture sector. And I see how potentially like having an element where at the night market people could engage responsibly in something like this could be really fun. But on the other side, we do have information from Island Health about, and I appreciate our partners at Island Health sharing that information with us about just generally slightly higher rates of substance use in Nanaimo, both of alcohol, and I know we understand that there's health impacts that go along with that. So I might be actually talking about a look at the liquor strategy in conjunction with a kind of nightlife and cultural space approach that looks at it like as a holistic thing and not just solely through the lens of alcohol consumption. But that's maybe a broader discussion than just from the public safety angle. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess from basically what I'm hearing is I think maybe we should just be leaving it with staff. And because it's like, is it really having a huge impact on public safety? Right now, the way things are, I think it's geared towards helping public safety. And unless we see there's something that you've heard that you don't agree with, then I think that the committee would say this, yes, we like where the policy was. Is there something that we would like to see changed? I haven't heard from anybody that there's anything that you've spoken about needs to be changed. I think one of the big things you spoke about was the ability for the ID part, which, having worked in that field, it's very important to have that. I mean, organized crime is always going to be around, but it's nice to have the ability to know who's around, and the fact that sometimes it does make them think twice, as you said. Public intoxication, I think, is already being dealt with, and it can be dealt with through the Provincial Liquor Act as well. So that's from a public safety. I think if we're going to look at the parks and stuff, I think that's something that needs really community consultation, not public safety consultation. It would need businesses, all that kind of stuff. So for me, I think it's important that was brought to us. And unless I hear differently from anybody in the committee, I'm quite content from my perspective to let staff just run with what they see. And then if they think there's going to be something significant that will impact, to bring it back. So any, Hillary?
So, sorry, just for my own clarity, there's a desire to take another look at this document and update it just because it is quite dusty at this point?
I don't think so. I think that the hospitality industry is involved in a lot of the challenges that were present in 2002 have been abated. I think the strategies that were developed are effective and still current and relevant.
Yeah, so unless I hear from anybody here that feels differently, I think, as far as I'm concerned, we've looked at it, we're, no issues that, and I haven't heard any issues from anybody at the table, and done, unless somebody else feels strongly that they want to put it back to us. But I appreciate everybody, me putting you on the spot and giving us your thoughts, but it was just, this way we could say we did look at it. Is there something that could be done differently? And I agree with Dave, like not having the nightclubs like makes a big difference with the number of kids coming downtown. I mean, we don't have anywhere near the issues we used to have. And I did check with the police on that because we don't have the same number of dance clubs, et cetera, so. Okay, so we'll leave it at that if there's anything else. Now, under new business, has anybody got anything? Colin?
I have a couple of things to add. One is whether we can discuss what steps the city is taking to make public washrooms safer after the syringe attack. And the other one is bringing forward the vacant building report and add that to the agenda of the Public Safety Committee. It was reviewed. And along that same vein, the Newcastle Community Association would like to make a presentation to this committee under the theme of the committee that notes the city empowers neighborhood associations as partners to raise concerns about the impact of homelessness and residents on local businesses.
I'll speak to the vacant building. That did not get brought back by council. There wasn't an appetite at the time to relook at it. They were quite content with the report and that any changes would be extremely costly to implement, so there wasn't an appetite to bring it back. If this council can always refer it back, but it has to wait 6 months because it wasn't put up for reconsideration.
Can I speak?
So it can't come back up for 6 months.
Can I ask a follow-up to that one?
Yes.
Is it something that we can discuss at this Public Safety Committee, though?
It has to be referred to from council,
Okay.
and that has to wait. It was October it was done, so another 4 months. Because I was sick, I was going to bring it back, but I was sick, and no other councilor wanted to bring it back for reconsideration.
Okay. And then that basically that's off the table.
For now.
For now.
Unless, I mean, somebody can bring it back to council in I think it's 4 more months, whatever the time frame is.
Okay.
I believe it's six months, right, Ms. Vicar, after, yeah, thank you.
And then the next is if we can, is there maybe a motion or a request to allow the Newcastle Community Association to make a presentation at the next Public Safety Committee meeting?
I'm going to turn to Ms. Vicar because there's been discussion around presentations, et cetera, if it has to be requested by council, or can the committee request a presentation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if there is an interest from the committee to hear from a particular group, there can be a motion in that regard, considered by the committee. I'm just looking across the room to my colleagues if they have any comments regarding this particular group that I'm not familiar with, but otherwise the committee can consider the possibility of inviting other groups to its meeting. There has been some interest expressed in the past regarding other organizations possibly coming to the committee as well. Thank you.
Hillary?
They can't just come as a delegation.
No, they can't come as a delegation. They have to be invited, so you would have to make the motion to invite them to do a presentation and specify what the presentation is about. So you can do that now?
Okay, yeah, so can I make a motion that this committee invite the Newcastle Community Association to the next Public Safety Committee meeting to raise concerns about the impact of homelessness on residents and local businesses?
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Ruth. Discussion. Doug?
I'm not that familiar with the Newcastle Committee and Community Association, and generally speaking, any community association sounds fine to me. But I would prefer a process whereby someone who wanted to speak to the committee put in sort of like an application form saying what their purpose was, what the presentation would be about, and what the time estimate was, and if they had some supporting material to provide that sort of in advance.
I'm going to turn to Ms. Vicar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there is a couple different options. So one is that a individual or an organization can submit an application through the city's website to appear as a delegation at a particular meeting, including a committee meeting. And then the application form for that does include specific fields, including the subject matter that they will be presenting on. And there is a time limit for those presentations, consistent with the procedure bylaw. The other option, which my understanding was we were looking at in this instance earlier, was that someone be invited by the committee to come and present on a particular topic. And staff and legislative services do also coordinate such presentations to ensure that they are of specific length and that there is time for the committee to have discussion, ask questions, provide comments in response to the presentation.
So what I'm hearing from Doug, correct me if I'm incorrect, invites fun, but we would like to see if they're doing a PowerPoint or whatever, the information be given to us beforehand so we can review it, correct?
Just a bit of screening.
Yeah, okay, so what it's about, is it gonna hit the topic of what the Public Safety Committee is about? I would say, and the presentations need to be limited, to, I believe it's 10 minutes in the procedure bylaw, am I correct? I can't remember.
And I'm not voting against the Newcastle
No,
Community
yeah.
Association as such, but I'm
No, it's just in general, like a process that needs to be followed, but, yeah, because we've had presentations that were 40 minutes that could have been condensed down, and I don't want to sit here
Yeah.
for 40 minutes for a presentation.
Yeah, I don't think that's, I made the motion. I think the one thing that I did hear over here is that the association would be asked to submit a request for delegation, but you said this committee cannot do delegations. So it does have to be a.
No, I said there's talk about that. We don't know what's, there's been two,
Okay.
I've had two different opinions on whether we can have delegations to a public safety committee. I was told no, that it has to go to council, and then council has to make the referral for that delegation to come to us.
Okay.
That's the process, is my understanding. So they would make a request to appear as a delegation before the public safety committee. That request would then go to council, and council would say yes or no.
Okay.
Correct, Hillary? Is that what you heard? That's what we were told.
So council has the final decision whether this
That's right,
presentation
for
would be.
delegations.
For delegation or presentations?
Yes,
Both.
yeah.
So I guess what because the Newcastle Community Association is watching this meeting. So I guess what I'm trying to understand or maybe provide some guidance is that, like, what is it that they need to do in order to be able to present to this committee?
So what, Ms. Vicar, did you want to take that, or? Because my understanding is there is a motion from here. This would go to council saying that we want to see a delegation from this committee, and then council would say yea or nay. Correct?
Yeah, I think like just, in turn to put some context around the motion, the Newcastle Community Association is far and away the most active in advocating for public safety in Nanaimo. Like, it's not even close. And their experience with impacts of street disorder on their community is well documented, and there's a long history. And I think that the city of Nanaimo, and by extension this committee, I think the Newcastle Community Association deserves to have a time to present to this committee. That's my opinion. So I've made the motion.
So, Ms. Vakar, my understanding would be if this motion passes, it will go to the next council meeting, which I believe is January 16th. Is it roughly then?
The next council meeting is on January 20th
Okay, January
of 2025.
20th. And then at that time, council would vote yea or nay to allow them to come do the presentation, correct? Okay. So we do have the motion. Any other discussion on it? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Scott.
Should the Newcastle Community Association be advocating to go speak before council?
No,
before this
before
committee.
this committee.
No, I understand.
Yeah,
but
so what would
it'd be
happen
more
is-
beneficial to them to go speak before
We've already
council?
heard from
Or
them.
not? Oh,
We've
you
heard
have,
from them.
okay.
Yeah. So I think,
This committee should hear
I'm just
from
trying to
them.
be
is
helpful.
I guess
yeah,
that-
what
yeah.
they want to
Seems
do
like
is,
a
they want
lot
the
of
pub.
governance to
Yeah,
get
no,
here.
they want the Public Safety Committee to hear their concerns and see that this is what they've experienced, this is what's going on in their community. Is there things that we can think of as a Public Safety Committee that we could make recommendations to council to improve security, safety, or like, maybe like insisting that every place has a good neighborhood agreement or security, whatever. A lot of things that council won't be able to do, but
Yeah.
just so that. Yeah.
And just
Okay.
in the theme of the committee, one of the themes of the committee notes, the city empowers the neighborhood associations as partners to raise concerns about the impact of homelessness on residents and local businesses.
That's correct, yeah. Is that okay? Any other questions? So all those in favor of having them? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Now for the public washrooms, that's operational, so right now I'm not going to take that till I can get an update from staff, and then if required, you can bring it up at the next one. Because there's only certain things that we can do, and WorkSafe is doing stuff. Staff right now, they try and move people along as best they can, and that's what happened in this particular case, that they were trying to move them along and something happened, so. It's like, it's either we lock them up and nobody gets to use them or whatever. So they are working on it, and perhaps we could ask for maybe an update at a later date. Because we can't speak to a WorkSafe investigation right now, so if that's okay. All right, any other updates or any other questions from any of the committee or anything else? Okay, so not seeing any, could I please have a motion to adjourn? Oh, sorry.
Oh, wait.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The other thing was the request to discuss the public washroom issue.
Yeah, that's what I just talked about.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I missed that. Okay.
I said we can't discuss that right now because it's subject of a WorkSafe investigation. We'll have to wait till that comes out.
Oh,
and-
sorry, okay.
And it's either we shut them down or they're not used. I mean, or we have to come up with, like right now, I can tell you, there are rather regular checks on them because people have been known to overdose in them. We've which is a sad thing. There's been assaults, we know that. But it's a matter of either you shut them down or we continue to what we're doing. There's not a lot more, in my opinion, that can be done that's not already being done, unless people are willing, like we've hired 10 more CSOs, which will help with some of that, so there'll be more patrols, et cetera. Okay. So Ruth?
Yeah, I had a question about warming centers. How many warming centers are open or will be open this year for this season?
Ms. Wood?
Thank you, through the chair. The Drop-In Hub is the only city-funded warming center, but just to note again, it's a year-round, so it will provide that service.
Warming and cooling.
Yeah, warming and cooling. There is another function that the city does around extreme weather responses, and we work with our service providers, but that is only enacted when we hit a certain threshold, and the province provides us funding to support that response.
Follow-up. So the warming center that was on Bowen, is that not happening this year? No.
No, through the chair, no.
We only have the one city-funded one, which is opening up January 4th or 5th, you said? Something like that?
January 2nd,
Second,
it's the
yeah.
same service provider, the one that
It's just
operated the
moved
one in Bowen.
locations.
So my follow-up question is, can you speak to why they've moved down into the right downtown? Like why they didn't continue to?
To utilize that location? Well, right now, you'll recall, and maybe the committee is not aware, but last year, they did have, when they were operating a warming center and providing expanded services, they had a major flood. And so right now, they're still in renovation, and so they've also got some other plans. Island Crisis Care does own that building, and so there's some other operational plans for that site, but right now they're not able to provide any of those types of services.
And I can also tell you that part of the building's already rented out to another group that's using it for kitchen preps and stuff. Okay, any other new business? Okay, not seeing any, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
Question period?
Question period doesn't exist anymore. It was never supposed to be at committee, that was my fault.
Do you have a question?
No. So that's been removed. I don't know, what is it, do you know why it's on there? Because we were told we're not supposed to have it?
Madam Chair, it's for the members of the public in case that there are individuals in the audience who wish to ask questions of the committee.
Because we were told no, so, but now it's back on. So any questions? Kevin, any questions?
No, it would just be along the lines of what Colin was asking for, and I realize it's through workplace safety now. Just knowing, since this is the city's public safety committee, what public safety is perhaps being more so enacted now at the public washrooms throughout the city and through public spaces, because I think that's very much on the minds of residents now.
I will say it, and I'm sure you've read it in the new financial plan, that 10 more community safety officers were approved, 12 more police officers over 5 years. So, we're doing what we can. There needs to be changes in some of the provincial mandates, and until those happen, there's not a lot we're going to be able to do. People do have the right to be downtown unless they're committing criminal offenses, et cetera, as you well know, you're well versed in it. And there are things that can be done, like if you go into a washroom and you see that, probably my advice would be that you leave and then you call for support from either bylaws or the public safety officers so that they can come in and do their job. And I wouldn't, that's what they're there for, and they're gonna try and hopefully hook them up to services. And they have had some successes, which you don't hear a lot about, but they actually are hooking some of these people up to services. They are getting some of them back with family members. So there is, they spend more time than police would, right? So they're actually getting to know the street population better than a lot of our police officers do. So that's one thing that can happen. And again, like I said, I can't speak to a workplace incident because that's being investigated by WorkSafe. And it's just a sad state right now that until our province and the federal government start opening up some dollars for treatment, detox, and more housing, unfortunately, people are going to shelter where they're going to shelter. And there's only so much we can do.
And I commend the city for what it has been doing, and Mr. LaBridge also, Christie as well, and your committee and city council. We were talking to one of the new ministers just this afternoon, Minister Young, 30 years with the VPD in Vancouver, 30 years, and he's very well aware. We made him very well aware of Premier Eby and his government and what has been happening from our public point of view and citizens. And let's see, as I said to Terry, what the heck are you going to do? You've got Gary Begg there now as the minister, the new Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General. So it's in their ball court. And the city, again, thank you for all you do in this committee. We're all trying to put as much pressure on the province as we can. David Eby has said there needs to be change. He heard it in the election around public safety. So it's in their ball court, needs to get off his arse and the whole government. And
I will tell you that Mr. Eby and his government previously have given us significant funds to help fund a lot of stuff. And, but for me, I think we need to really start looking at more prevention dollars and more treatment dollars. You can't police your way out of this, as we've heard, and which I agree with, and I think most of this committee would agree with, that in order to help these people, what are the root causes of their poverty and why are they on the streets to begin with? And that's where we need to really start putting a lot of dollars in, and that is the provincial and federal responsibility. In my opinion, and the city does put a lot of money in, even though we're not required to. It's not our mandate. We've got Ms. Wood that spends most of her days working on social issues and trying to, find warming centers. City's paying from taxpayers' dollars for warming centers, again, which is a provincial responsibility. So we are trying our best with limited funds, as well as trying to keep the core responsibilities of the city running. So I'm also going to encourage you to please start putting pressure on your MP so we can get some housing built for those people that are low income so they don't end up on the streets.
Shall do. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, Chair Armstrong and the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Or okay, sorry, now I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Doug, seconded by Scott, all in favor? Thank you, committee. We got to straighten out that question period because Sheila told us no question period. So yeah.